Welcome to Something About a Pie. Today, we'll be talking about that time that Abraham fought off 4 armies to get his nephew back with only 318 men. Let's talk about the setup. Abraham, still named Abram, lived in the middle of the region of Canaan. For simplicity's sake, we'll refer to him as Abraham for this video. His nephew, Lot, lived in the city of Sodom. That was at the south end. Their shepherds didn't like each other very much, so they had split their flocks. Abraham had let Lot pick where he wanted, and he picked the watered plains, which were wonderful. Just that where Abraham was, in the mountains, was a whole lot safer. In fact, the trigger for this series of battles was that a northern invading group came and captured Lot as a slave. Abraham heard about it, was furious, and decided to go save him. The first battles in this happened before Abraham got involved, in what was called the War of 4 against 5 Kings. You see, there were 4 kingdoms from the north, Elam, Shinar, Elasar, and Goyim, that made an alliance under King Kedorlaomer. Kedorlaomer? They invaded Canaan and wanted to capture loot and slaves. So, who did they off? At the Battle of Ashtaroth Karnaim, they defeated the tribe of Rephaites. The Rephaites, or Rephaim, were a tribe of giants. As if that wasn't enough to make everybody else surrender, they then went on to defeat 5 more tribes in Ham, Shavakiriathaim, the hills of Seir, and Mishpat, and Hazozon Tamar. So many difficult names in this. They then set their eyes on 2 city-states in the region, Gomorrah and Sodom. They were rich and full of loot, so the 4 armies got ready to invade. The 2 kings of these cities banded together, and 3 more kings joined them, the kings of nearby city-states Zeboim, Admah, and Zor. But they were small armies used to living in rich cities, and the northern kings rallied large forces of professional fighters. So when the northern armies arrived, the kings kinda just ran away, and it let the Northern Alliance capture all the loot from their cities. Among this capture was Lot, Abraham's nephew. Now, we're on to the point when Abraham decided to strike back. Upon hearing the news of his nephew's capture, Abraham rallied 318 trained men and decided to go in pursuit. He pursued the now loot-laden armies all the way to a city called Dan. Now, before we talk about the battles, let's talk about the soldiers involved. Let's imagine you were a soldier for the northern armies. Here's what you might be wielding. Spears, shields, socketed axes, and sickle swords were all sort of the tools of the trade for melee in that region. You hopefully had a padded tunic with bronze studs to deflect blows and a bronze helmet. If you were not an infantryman, you may have been an archer, employing the new technology of the composite bow. If you were very skilled, rich, and lucky, you might have been a chariot driver or a chariot archer. In this prestigious position that was both more covered by the bronze chariot and more open due to being a few feet off the ground, you were afforded what's called scale mail because of its resemblance to scales. You maintained this armor, your chariot, and your horse at your own expense. This army would have been divided into semi-trained militia, who were probably conscripts, and professional soldiers. As a militia member, you would have been lightly armed, probably with only a bow and a spear. It may even have still been tradition that you brought your own weaponry. As a trained soldier in the infantry, you would have been armed with a sickle sword, a socketed axe, and a shield, and maybe a dagger. You would very likely have been provided the padded armor that I described earlier, as well as a helmet. If you were one of Abraham's brave 318, it's probable that you weren't trained by a regular military leader, but possibly by an experienced Apiru, a social outcast group that often raided Canaanite princes, acting as robbers and freebooters. It's contested as to whether Abraham and his shepherds were Apiru themselves. A lot of Apiru were in fact not murderers and robbers. The later King David, for instance, was almost certainly an Apiru for part of his life. Whatever the case, Abraham's warriors were probably structured more similarly to an Apiru group than an actual Canaanite army. You would likely, as a nomadic warrior, be armed with a sickle sword, a long dagger, or a socketed axe. You probably had a bow, though whether it was composite or more traditional is up for debate. You may have had the traditional Canaanite shield, a tall figure 8 with a narrow waist. This allowed for great visibility in melee combat. There was also one powerful advantage that you had over Canaanite infantry. You very likely owned a horse. This is important for a number of reasons. Firstly, it allowed Abraham's soldiers to catch up with the army, especially because they were hauling large amounts of heavy loot and slaves. However, Abraham still had the large disadvantage of only having 318 men. So how did he solve this problem? He divided his soldiers into groups and had them attack at night. With small groups divided in the enemy camp, it probably would have been very easy to sow confusion and fear. And for that reason, it's not that surprising that the battle ended with the northern kings retreating in various directions. That, of course, made it very easy to rescue Lot and head home.